statements, which will ask you to pick your answer and use reactions here in Teams. You can put the thumbs up if you think this is truth, and maybe surprised face if you think that it's false. And I'm going to be reading it out loud, and then we're going to reveal this little statement. So the first one is, laughter is important for resilience. Come on, your reactions. Is it true or false? Yeah. And I think Haley is the expert in this one, so she will reveal.
Yeah, so the answer for this one is true. So laughter is like massively, massively important for resilience. So laughter is very strongly and very positively correlated with our resilience. And actually, the more we laugh, I mean, A, the happier we feel in that moment, even if temporarily. And B, also massages something called our vagus nerve, which is really, really important in terms of regulating how quickly we're able to calm down after stress. So laughter as often as possible, everyone.
Amazing. And the second one is, crying is good for us. Leave your reactions. Yeah, I see some dubs.
Loads of thumbs up. Yeah, so this one again is true. So crying is good for us. It's really cathartic. And actually, as well, when we cry, we release excess stress hormones through our tears. So it literally helps us to calm down.
Nice. And the third one is, the spicy food can make you happy. I think it's true, but you won't.
Oh, we got a love there and everything. Someone's a big fan. Big fan of the spice. Loads of thumbs up. Yeah, perfect. So this one again is true. So there's a compound usually found in chilies called capsaicin. And again, it helps to release endorphins. So because spicy food is quite hot in your mouth, your body literally thinks you're being injured. It thinks you're being burned and releases all the endorphins that make us feel good, our body's natural painkillers. So yeah, you can get the equivalent of like a runner's high from eating a good bit of spice.
Yeah, and the next three statements will be kind of connected with what we do at Global M and what we're going to talk about today as well. So the first one is that 98% of workers want to work remotely at least some of the time. What do you think? Is it the right number? Wow, a lot of thumbs up. It is true. As the survey was this year, 98% voted that they want to have at least some time of remote work. And next one is 2 hours is the average time per week that people save by not commuting to work. What do we think? A lot of mixed reactions because it can be true, but Haley is right. It is more. On average, people save 4 hours per week by not commuting to work, so save some time with our remote work. And what about the last one? Remote workers are getting more work done. Yeah, it is true. And I think it helps us to focus more. And yeah, that's what people answer, that you can kind of be in your zone when you're at home, don't have coffee chats. Well, which is very important, and we're going to talk about it later. But yeah, it's a lot of time to focus when you work from home. I see we have quite a lot of people joined now, so I'll probably start. And I'm going to start with introducing myself. I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a marketing and communications manager at Global M. And today I'm going to be moderating this webinar. And I'm actually very excited about our webinar, as we have amazing companies who collaborated and organized this session for you today. And I'm very happy to introduce them. So first we have Global M, It is an international recruitment agency working with a unique RPO model with worldwide clients. We have teamed the company who helps businesses to find the easiest and the fastest way to compliantly employ talent all over the world without an overseas entity. They help you with your compliance, with payroll, with benefits. And we also have PMAC, the company which specializes in providing bespoke training solution to individuals and organizations across the UK on mental health. And of course, our amazing speakers today are Vincent, who is an operations manager at Global M, Shamir, lead people and growth at Teamed, and Haley, training director at PMAC. Today, we're going to talk about the art of building successful remote teams. This topic is something that is very important and closely related. Sorry? I think someone just joined. Yeah, so this topic is something that is very important and closely related to each of the organizations and each of our speakers. We're going to be talking today about the full process of building remote teams, starting from how to hire and set up a functioning remote team, explaining the strategic and operational advantages of building remote teams the right way, and discussing the importance of remote well-being and safe working environment. We also wanted to mention that we picked a special date for our webinar, as this week is a National Inclusion Week in the UK. And we think that remote work is something that makes our workplace and companies more diverse and inclusive, of course. And this is one of the main benefits of remote working, which we will cover during our webinars as well. So I think we should start with our first speaker, Vincent. Vincent works at Global M. He works closely with our talent partners and helps many companies around the world to find the best talent and build international remote teams. So yeah, I'll give a word to you, Vincent.
Amazing. Thanks, Liz, for a great introduction. Hello, everyone. And yeah, thanks for having me here. I hope I can contribute, partly from my own experience working remotely for almost more than a year now, but indeed also working with amazing talent partners that are almost also fully remote, working often also for remote clients that we have. So that's a bit where my experience with remote hiring and working comes from. I will start with a bit of an introduction of the hiring part. Also, Shamir will talk more about this, but just to give you an introduction on, yeah, how do you actually start the whole process if you don't have a remote team yet? How can you start it, and how can you find those niche talents that can really help build you a very strong remote team? So first of all, like if you talk specifically about hiring, there are a few strong benefits that can really make it easy for you to find that great talent. So first of some will be a bit obvious, but let's dive a bit deeper into them and also give some examples to make you really understand these benefits. So yeah, obviously there's a huge cost and time effectiveness involved here. There's no need for in-person interviews. There's no commute. Looking at already the poll that we've seen, that saves a lot of costs. There's no on-site facilities obviously necessary. But also maybe even more importantly, and we'll talk more about it, there are much lower salary expectations, potentially, obviously depending where you're going to find that remote talent. So hiring a remote software developer from another part of maybe Eastern Europe is obviously completely different than hiring one inside of London. And obviously, depending on your needs, you may want to adjust it and find a balance between that. But that's obviously a very big benefit that you could make use of when you hire remotely. Now, also this one may be a bit obvious, but you're diving into a much bigger talent pool. And also teams will talk a bit more about that. But you can obviously look in theory all over the world. Obviously, you have to keep some boundaries in mind, but you can recruit, I don't know, that marketing specialist that actually knows a lot about the Asian market, while you're maybe an Amsterdam-based company. but you want to reach the ASEAN market. Then you want someone on board who really knows that market, and which may be harder to find inside of Amsterdam. Well, if you look abroad and you actually look in the ASEAN market, that could be a huge facilitator for that. At the same time, you can scale and grow in an agile way, but also reduce your teams if necessary, especially if you work with contractors that are working for you remotely. So imagine you have a technical support team that has a high demand on the summer, or the other way around in winter, but the other months it's calmer. If you work on contract based with people that also switch projects a lot, which happens a lot when you hire remote, it allows you to scale and downscale in an agile way that can really help your company adjust to the circumstances of the time of the year or the situation of your company. With that bigger talent pool, you really get access to those niche skills. So you may not find that specific blockchain developer that you need for your very specific niche project within your company in your area, but because in general there may not be so many blockchain developers. But if you open your market and look for remote blockchain developers, obviously that opens a lot more opportunities. At the same time, to attract people, it helps a lot if you offer remote positions. So obviously it becomes a bit easier to hire people because people will be very attracted to the fact that they can work maybe hybrid, but especially fully remote is really a hot topic right now. Now, especially in tech, there are a lot of people that actually just want to work remote because it gives them a lot of benefits, as also Teamed and PMAC will explain later. And lastly, we mentioned this before already, and this is an important aspect of why we thought this webinar is important. It really can help you increase diversity and facilitate diversity as well. If you look obviously all over the world and suddenly, I don't know, you're a Barcelona-based company, you can suddenly look in parts of Africa, parts of Asia, parts of South America for that great talent. That will really diversify your teams. And you see that especially already happening for a few years already in tech companies, that almost automatically they became extremely diverse. I know companies in Barcelona that have like 20, 30 nationalities and a team of 100 people. And that's obviously amazing also from a business perspective, because diversity has proven all over and over again. It has a lot of benefits for decision making and teamwork. So having looked at the benefits, obviously there are also some challenges. They are definitely challenges that you can overcome, but you have to keep them in mind when you start the hiring process remotely. So obviously remote hiring relies a lot on technology, just as regular remote working. And you have to keep this in mind. Whether you are obviously a candidate, you need to keep it in mind, be prepared, have an extra laptop there in case the laptop falls out during your interview. But also as a company, keep it in mind when you speak to your candidates. Don't immediately cut them off if their internet connection suddenly drops, especially if you start hiring from countries, maybe in certain parts of Africa or other parts of the world where the internet connection may be a little more unstable. Obviously, you can keep that in mind and always respect the fact that sometimes there are factors outside the candidate's control. So keep that in mind and be prepared for that, and be maybe a bit more flexible than when you invite someone into your London office who lives in the next neighborhood and is 15 minutes late. Maybe a bit different. Obviously, candidate engagement is a bit harder because if you meet someone in person for the first interview, it's obviously a bit easier to have a connection, offer a coffee, give them a tour around the building. That's obviously different than if you just have a call with someone. So it's really, I mean, in general, it's important to keep your candidates up to date, but remote hiring to keep them also really engaged in the process and already feel a connection with your company, keep them updated during the process. And at the same time, maybe provide like videos of your company culture to already give them a bit of the vibe of your company. Now this team will give you great valuable information, but you have to keep it in mind, just already mentioning the legal and compliance challenges. Like obviously hiring someone from a complete different part of the world may imply different legal context that you have to keep in mind. And especially if you start hiring them as employees remotely, that may be a bit difficult, and then you may need a partner like Teamed, for instance. And lastly, this relates a bit more to what PMAC will also talk about. Limited personal interaction already in the hiring process makes it a lot harder to assess someone's skills, and especially soft skills, which I will mention also a bit later. So you could add an extra interview purely focused on a cultural fit to really see, when you're not meeting this person in person, but we can like maybe give an extra effort to really see if it's a fit from both sides. So knowing the benefits and the challenges, would we say with our experience at Global M, how can you hire remotely effectively? So first of all, platforms. I mean, I'm a big platform guy. I think it's really important to use the right tools. I will even dive a bit deeper into that in a bit. But there are a lot of tools that can help you find talent, especially for remote positions. Obviously, LinkedIn and the more obvious tools, but also maybe Stack Overflow, We Work Remotely, these kind of platforms that are almost like built to facilitate remote hiring. And again, evaluating soft skills, or I would rather say communication skills, with soft skills is a bit like overused term maybe. But if you work remotely, like being very accurate, having the right communication skills, especially online, writing proper emails, writing clear messages to your team members, this is something you can already check also during the hiring process. So if you get some emails from a candidate that are a bit weird and not structured in the way that you would expect it from an employee or a team member in your company, you may already want to think or at least ask a question about that. And the other way around as well for a candidate, if the communication from the company that goes over email, Slack or whatever is already not really fitting to how you would work, keep that in mind. That's an important thing to pay attention to. Previous work experience in remote context can obviously make a big change. Looking at myself, I'm not sure if I would have hired myself a year ago for a remote role. Global M did. I'm really happy with that. But if I look at myself and the skills I've learned and how to like work remotely, also taking care of yourself, is very different from a year ago. So it adds a lot of value if someone at least already worked in a strong hybrid position. Another thing that we can really recommend is establishing a very clear remote working policy. Now, obviously, that applies more to what teams will talk about, and once you actually have that team maybe already. But you can also already share this with candidates to give them a really clear overview of what you expect from them if they would join your team. We're talking about the communication channels, response times that you expect from them, the working hours and all these things. And also as a candidate, ask for that already from the company. They may have a policy like that. For instance, Global M, we have that policy since some time. It gave a lot of clarity on what do we expect from our team members, because obviously we cannot just walk in the office and see them and see, oh, you're actually here. Nice. And lastly, and this is really key, keep cultural differences in mind. It's a bit of a cliche, but especially when hiring, you may see something as weird or strange. Well, actually, it's just a cultural difference that maybe you actually lack the knowledge of understanding the other person's context, which is also not a bad thing, but it makes sense, especially if you would start hiring all over the world. You have to keep a lot of local context in mind. So be open about it, ask people as well, maybe ask colleagues from comparable contexts. Obviously, be careful not to generalize at the same time, but these are just something to keep in mind and be open and transparent about. Now, as I said, I'm a guy that likes tools. So at Global M especially, we have utilized specific tools to really facilitate remote hiring and also helping our clients with remote hiring. So some of these tools you probably know. I'm sure you will know them. But just a quick overview how I would recommend using them. So Trello, obviously mainly used for project management and tasks, but if you have a small talent pool that you're taking from or a smaller hiring process, Trello can also be amazing to manage your candidates, for instance. So if you do not want to implement the whole ATS to manage all your candidates and applicant tracking system, yeah, use Trello and just create columns with the different stages of your hiring phase, and can work really well, especially in a collaborative online environment. Talking about policies and procedures, Notion is amazing to keep track of, like an internal wiki. So you can write the procedures for remote hiring there, but also establish the remote working policy that you can write and save there and easily share also with new candidates. Obviously, keep any confidential information out there. Slack, it's a cliche. There are also other tools. We're now using Microsoft Teams. It all works. In my experience, Slack is the best simulator of an actual working environment, also because it comes with a lot of extensions. And for administrators, you can add a lot of things that can really add value to remote working. But yeah, a good communication tool that you use on a daily basis is key. ChatGPT, can be really helpful for instance, creating the perfect remote job description. But I am specifically pointing it out. Also, be careful of this because it is more a general job description advice. Be careful in generating a very, what you think is an amazing text, but look at the buzzwords. How many social media texts and job positions do we see with a thrilling opportunity, unlock your next opportunity? There are a lot of things that make it more and more easy to see this is a ChatGPT text. So keep that in mind, use it as guidance. It can be great to give you like IDs, but at the same time, still give it that personal touch, also for those remote positions. Charlie HR or tools that you can manage your teams. It's really useful, especially for candidates in the latest stages. You may already want to start onboarding them, especially for remote working environments. Having the right tools to manage your teams is really useful. And obviously Teams can also help you with this. WhatsApp sounds a bit weird here, right? But this I'm especially putting here if you indeed start hiring from countries where WhatsApp is maybe much more used for business environments as well. Candidates that may use WhatsApp to also talk to to companies they're applying to and the other way around. Or you have clients that you work with remotely. In like, at least in my experience being here in Barcelona and from Holland, we don't use WhatsApp so much. It's really an informal communication tool. But working with our talent partners, for instance, in different parts of Africa, we see it's much more common to have contact with candidates through WhatsApp. And Airtable, it's my favorite. It's very customizable. I would only recommend this if you're really into tech and into tools. It's a non-coding tool, which allows you to actually build your own ATS, your own CRM. At Global M, we could actually help you with that. But it's a really cool tool if you actually don't want to spend too much money on a very customizable tool, but at the same time, you need to invest some time to build it. Yeah, and lastly, just to also do a smooth transition to the next speaker, getting the right stakeholders involved can really help you building a remote team. So obviously, we're promoting Global M here and Teams and PMAC. These are just examples. Obviously, we have competitors. We're still the best. But it's more that it can really help you. So Global M is an example. We can really help you building that remote team. We have the experience, we have the knowledge, and we know the ins and outs of what you should pay attention to. Although after this webinar, you will have that too. And Teamed is amazing with giving that support once you actually start hiring and onboarding people for your teams. And can also really help you, as Shamir will also explain later, with the compliance part and keeping in mind all the different legal contexts of different countries. And PMAC, well, also a personal favorite of mine, considering my own personal background in social work, is really focusing once you have those employees, and you need maybe an external partner to make sure their well-being is taken care of, because it's much harder to do that when you have remote teams. So once you have hired that first talent remotely, make sure that from the start you follow maybe the help and support and guidelines from organizations like PMAC. That brings me to the next speaker. Liz, I give the word to you to introduce them. Thank you very much, everyone. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions, and I'm happy to help. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. Yeah, I've dropped the link into the chat here, so you can connect with Vincent. You can learn more about Global M, and also while it's fresh, you can pop your question in the chat if you have questions for Vincent about recruitment, and we'll answer them later during our Q&A session. And yeah, I think now that we know how to find the talent remotely and why we should do it, it's the right time to talk about our next topic, which is how to legally and organizationally set up your remote teams and points to consider when building remote teams. And I think that's something that our next speaker is an expert in. So I'll give my word to Shamir.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to check, everybody can see my screen. It says part 2, the strategic and operational advantages.
Yep, we can see.
Yeah, perfect. All right, perfect. Well, again, thank you all for your time. My name is Shamir. I'm from Teamed. I lead the kind of people and growth side of the business. Been here for 3 years, but actually have been working remotely before it became cool and fashionable and trendy, because I've been working remotely for 6, 7, 8 years, I think. So a bit of a remote working veteran. I'm just going to the slide on the slide that you can see there just gives you a bit of an agenda as to what I'll be talking about today, which is just to recap on some of what Vincent's already said, but from a different perspective as to why you want to hire remotely and why you want to be thinking about hiring remote talent. Things to consider when hiring remote talent. So that's really taking a deep dive into the compliance side of things. I want to introduce you to the concept of an employer of record, because even though the industry, the employer of record industry, which is what Teamed is a part of, is growing, there's still lots of people unaware of what an employer of record, or EOR, is and how it works. And then I'll just run through a few questions that you might want to ask yourself as to whether an employer of record is right for your business. So just thinking about, why businesses these days are actually thinking more around remote work from an operational standpoint is the fact that, remote work immediately allows you to operate, or having a remote team rather, allows you to operate an international business covering all time zones. And so if you are a business that is, you have customers in Asia, or you have customers in the US, and you're European based, then immediately by employing talent in those two parts of the world, you've got all time zones covered, and you're then close to your customers in their time zone. So it's definitely worth considering that if you do have an international client base. Vincent spoke about kind of salaries. Of course, a developer in central London, the salaries will be far higher than a developer in Poland, for example. But actually, it's not only just the salaries that you want to be thinking about, it's actually employment costs. Because if you were to compare like for like, and you were to have a salary of £50,000, for example, if you paid £50,000 to someone in London, compared to £50,000 or the equivalent in South Africa, what you'd actually find is the employment costs are less in South Africa. So even though the salaries are the exact same, the actual cost of employment is far less in South Africa than it is in the UK, for example. On the flip side of that, the employment costs are far higher in somewhere like France than they are in the UK. So these are it's a great way to think about how you might want to reduce overall social security or employment costs, if indeed that's one of the objectives of hiring remote talent. Vincent mentioned this, but it's an obvious one, local talent pools versus global talent oceans. By hiring remotely, you have access to talent around the world. You have access to people that are, or countries or regions that are hotspots or hotbeds for talent. So for example, there are a great number of kind of blockchain or Web3 developers coming out of Eastern Europe right now, and there's a huge amount of talent out there. There's a great number of financial services professionals that are coming out of South Africa. So again, that might be, if you're in the financial services space, there's a lot of people in South Africa that you could tap into. So again, looking at opening up casting your net wider when it comes to looking at talent and where that talent is based. And of course, Global M is there for you to help with that. Again, a lot of employees are now looking for remote work, and they want to work from home. Not everyone, granted, but a lot of people are. And therefore, if you are positioned as a remote employer, it's going to do you wonders when it comes to your employer branding and the reputation of your business. And finally, again, a pretty obvious one, but it can reduce your overheads, right? As we saw during the pandemic, for example, lots of people were letting go of big costly offices in central London or in New York or in San Francisco, wherever that might be. You can definitely reduce, why spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds a month on big costly offices when you just don't need to. So they're the kind of common reasons why you want to think of building remote teams. Of course, on the flip side of that, if you think about kind of in your business from an ethical standpoint, and lots of people are talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, these types of things, simply opening up a borderless or having a borderless career opportunities within your company kind of really helps you in all of these things. So by looking at offering career opportunities based on skills, not geographic location, what you're doing is allowing everybody to apply, or anybody to apply who has the right skills, regardless of where they're based. Now, of course, if you have someone applying from South Africa and Nigeria and India and Brazil and all the rest of it, what you're doing then is actually embracing the diversity of culture. And it's a big kind of tick for you when it comes to the diversity and inclusion piece. I've always been a little bit against the word or the term like-minded people. It kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And so I was thinking about how actually having people from around the world as part of your team, you're not necessarily all like-minded. You've got different perspectives, and different perspectives actually makes for a healthier business. Especially if you're expanding into an international, another location. So if you are expanding into China, for example, it helps to have people on the ground who can educate you on the local and how locals think, as opposed to someone from your country who kind of thinks they know how the local market works. And then, of course, what it actually does by offering remote work is creates a level playing field. Now, what you're doing by opening up your opportunities, your career opportunities, your jobs to an international audience or an international workforce is you're creating a level playing field. So now the single mother in Nigeria, for example, has an equal opportunity for a fulfilling career as someone based in London. So again, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those things, it's a really good way to approach that. And so if you are going international and you are hiring from talent from overseas, these are things that you really should be considering from a real kind of doing things the right way. So from a compliance standpoint, you want to be asking yourself, do I want to hire this individual as a contractor or as a full-time employee? Now, of course, if you are thinking about a contractor, and that's perfectly fine, there are things that you need to think about. A bit like how we have IR35 in the UK, other countries have similar sorts of things. So you need to be asking yourself, is this person working on a project basis or kind of a full-time? Are they integrating into our business? If you're integrating them into your business, you probably should be think about bringing them on as an employee. If it's a short-term 3-month, 6-month project, then a contractor might be more feasible. Are they responsible for their own working hours? Again, if they are responsible for their own working hours and they can outsource some of the work to other people, then a contractor might be an option for you. However, if they are the only person that will be responsible for doing the work, and they start at 9 a.m. their time or finish at 5 p.m. their time, or any hour, it doesn't really matter. But if you need to be very clear on whether they're actually should be considered as an employee or a contractor, because again, if you're dictating what time someone starts work and what time someone finishes their work, then again, they're probably more likely to be an employee. And so this contractor employee debate, we can take this offline. If you have any questions, we can go through an assessment and figure out if you should be hiring them as a contractor or an employee. Happy to support in that. But what that comes with is things like compliance and risk and liability. So we've had time and time again where people are companies have hired people as contractors and then put themselves and the contractor at risk of the misclassification of employment. So you need to be very, very careful, because by misclassifying or wrongly misclassifying an employee as a contractor, what you're doing is putting yourself at risk of being investigated by local authorities, having to backdate taxes, having to backdate salaries. And so there's a lot of kind of expertise around how compliance and risk and liability works. So again, we're happy to have those conversations. Please do feel free to reach out at any time. Where the talent is based, this is like I mentioned earlier, and like Vincent has mentioned, and again, Vincent and Global M are the experts at this, of course, but they'll be able to help you identify where the talent is. If you're looking for a specific Web3 developer, you're looking for a specific, specific skill sets, there are pockets around the world where you'll find an abundance of talent with those types of skill sets. And so, whether that's tied in with universities or academic institutions, there's definitely pockets of talent that you could tap into if you're looking for a specific person with some specific skills. Compensation and benefits. We often find clients initially say to themselves, well, we'll offer everybody the same, regardless of where they're based. We will offer them the same benefits, and that's one lens that you can look through. And and then there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, understanding the nuances of each and every country is something that we can help with. So, for example, employees in mainland Europe, and I use that term to describe places like France or Spain or Greece or Italy, they're far more protected, generally speaking, than employees in the UK. And therefore, the employer contributions that you pay in those countries are higher than they are in the UK. And therefore, you might then want to think about benefits from a different angle, which is more of a country, on a country by country basis. So is giving everybody the same benefits the right lens to look through? That's a decision for you and your organization. But of course, there are other lenses to look through, and you might want to look at it on a country by country basis. And then finally, you want to ask yourself, well, if I'm doing this, if we are hiring overseas, do we want to do it ourselves? Do we want to set up our own legal entity? Do we want to find our own payroll provider? Do we need to find our own employment lawyers and set up business bank accounts and all the rest of it? Or do we use a different model, which is the employer of record model, which I'm here to introduce you to today? So what is an employer of record? I get that asked all the time, especially when I'm in the pub trying to wind down from work. Someone asks me what I do, and I mention employer of record, and suddenly I'm back in the work conversations. But fundamentally, an employer of record is a third-party company. So Teamed is an employer of record, and Teamed is a third-party company that employs talent on your behalf. So what we do not do is we don't identify candidates. That's what Global M are great at. But what we can do is, once you've found the right candidate and you want to make them an offer of employment, we can do everything that comes after that. So what we do is we manage the compliance in the country, we manage the payroll, we manage the taxes, we manage the benefits, and we manage ad hoc services. So, if we need to get people an office space for 1 day a week, or we need to provide them with laptops and mobile phones and a desk and a chair for their home office, we can do all of that as well. But ultimately what we do is remove all of that burden from your kind of plate or your shoulders, because actually understanding the nuances of employment law and compliance and tax in each and every country is indeed a minefield. And of course, you probably don't want to be doing that if you're employing, one person in Spain or one person in Italy or one person in South Africa. It just doesn't make sense to do that on your own. Another thing that actually employers of records are actually good at is time and money, saving companies time and money. Ultimately, to set up a business in any country just to employ someone in that country will take an awful lot of time. Often I find it quite amusing because people say, oh, we're going to be opening our entity in the next 3 months in the US, and 99% of the time it takes a lot longer. So it saves time, it saves money, and actually reduces all the complexity of compliance, because of course we take the ownership because we are employing talent on your behalf. You don't need to worry about anything. And of course, when it comes to labor laws and liabilities and insurances and making sure things are done the right way, that's what we do. We assume all the liabilities to make sure that we are there employing talent on your behalf in the right way, so you don't actually have to worry about that whatsoever. So why do people use EORs, and what are the use cases? So the 6 of the most common use cases that we find are these 6 on your screen. So the first one, and probably the most common one, is the remote first company. These are those companies that really do not care where their talent is based. They just simply want the best talent around the world. And if you're looking for a competitive advantage, and people are that competitive advantage, then opening up the borders and letting, actually looking for talent across the world will definitely help you compared to someone who is only restricting their workforce to one given country or one city even. So the remote first company is those companies that we speak to on a daily basis who say, hey, we found an amazing person in India, we found an amazing person in Canada, we found an amazing person in Brazil, and we want to employ them. So that's the kind of the primary use case. We also find that contractor conversions is a big one, because more often than not, what will happen is a company will hire someone overseas as a contractor, and then you know, someone will come knocking, or an HR person will say, hold on, this person actually shouldn't be a contractor, they should be an employee. And so rather than opening your own legal entity in that country to employ them, you can use a service like Teamed, who can employ them on your behalf. So that, again, avoiding that misclassification of employment is a key use case, and another reason why people use companies use EORs. Strategic expansion, I mentioned that earlier, but it's a very quick and easy way to get boots on the ground very quickly if you are looking to strategically expand into another territory. So for us, we find a lot of people wanting to expand in the US market, and they want to test their products and services and their offerings in the US market. But rather than actually going through the kind of cost and pain and drama of setting up an entity in the US initially, they will use an employer of record. And we will be able to manage the employment side of things to get people on the ground up and running very, very quickly. And of course, if things work out and they expand into the US market and it works very, very well, then of course they may open their own legal entity at some point in the future. But this is a very quick way to get people on the ground in a given country for your strategic expansion. I mentioned it earlier, I touched upon it briefly, but local talent shortages, you know, we're finding that in some industries, from Web3 to artificial intelligence to some financial services, that actually we just don't have the talent locally. They're just not available. And so some companies are almost forced to look overseas because they just can't find the talent locally. And then staff relocations. This has come up especially during things like the pandemic, whereby people have maybe caught the last flight out to, you know, wherever their home country is, and they're still currently operating on a UK employment contract. And now the employee sitting in Spain is saying, hey, you know, I'd much prefer to work remotely from Spain if I can. Can you help me? Can I be employed from here? And, you know, companies are using us to make that happen. So if it's relocating staff that have people who have already relocated, or people that are planning to relocate, an employer of record is as a solution for that. And then finally, a use case that we come across not very often, but is actually companies that are downsizing. So recently I've spoken to a few clients or a few companies that are downsizing their operations. Coincidentally, there were 2 or 3 companies that were downsizing operations in Canada. And so companies that are going from 20 employees to 3 may think about actually scrapping or getting rid of their own legal entity and transferring those 2 or 3 employees onto an employer of record, which then reduces costs and makes it more efficient for them. And then finally, just to introduce you to Teamed. Like I said, Teamed, we are an employer of record. We help companies compliantly employ talent around the world, effortlessly, with speed and efficiency. And the kind of reasons people use us are basically because we solve real world problems. We're there to make sure things like compliance is taken care of, misclassification won't be an issue, liability, insurances, all of those types of things are ticked. As an organization, we tend not to take a one-size-fits-all approach. We understand businesses are different, they have different needs, and therefore what we try and do is flex with our clients as much as we possibly can, within the boundaries of employment law, of course, but we try and flex as much as we possibly can. We're very competitive in the market, so whereas most other employer of records will typically charge you a fixed fee for what they do, regardless of the country and regardless of the salary of the employee, our model is different. Our model is based on the percentage of the salary, and therefore the lower the salary, the lower our fees, the higher the salary, the higher our fees, but we cap our fees at £500, and therefore that's probably what, in fact, they charge more, but a lot of competitors will charge more than £500. Ours is a scaling model. We are incredibly fast at what we do. So if you need an employment contract out to someone tomorrow in Spain, not a problem, we make it happen. So speed and flexibility, again, is one of our many strengths. And then really, just as an organization, we are absolutely obsessed, and like really obsessed, with the experience that we provide our clients and our employees. We know that we're in a people business, and therefore we know that if we treat the employees and the clients the way they deserve to be treated, it will have a ripple effect, and we will get recommended to other employers and employees alike. And finally, we are not a plug and play platform company alone. A lot of the employer of records are, here's the platform, let the platform do everything. We're kind of a bit the other way around. We're very much kind of human centric. We will hold your hand. We are here, 24 hours a day to answer any legal questions that you may have. But ultimately, we're a human first employer of record platform company. And that's that. Thanks again. Thank you for your time. If you've got any questions, again, I'm on LinkedIn, email. I think Vincent mentioned WhatsApp. If you want to WhatsApp me, you can do that as well. No problem at all.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shamir. You can find the links in the chat to connect. And yeah, while talking about remote work, it's very important to talk about our employees' well-being and health and mental health. That's why Haley will be providing us her presentation around this topic. So I'll quickly give a word to you. Yeah, and let's start.
Thank you. So I'm Haley. I'm the training director at PMAC. I hope you can all see my slides and you can all hear me okay. So at PMAC, we specialise in creating completely bespoke trainings for businesses on anything that relates to mental health and wellbeing. So that can be anything from, again, helping to retain staff. So you've got the right people finally from wherever they're joining your business. We can help you to retain them essentially. So I'm not going to go into loads of detail with this bit because we've already kind of covered it, but very much different minds, different ways of thinking, different norms, different communication styles, essentially help a business to absolutely thrive. And again, as Shamir and Vincent have already touched upon, as a business, it also helps you to open up to new markets. But there are some challenges that come with working remotely. So people who are working remotely, potentially, if we're thinking about somebody who their business is based in London, the company that work for is based in London, and they're operating from Australia, there's a very good chance they're going to be working on sociable hours in their time, which can impact things like your sleep pattern, it can impact your well-being, your eating habits, all this sort of stuff. Some people who work remotely might find that they feel isolated, which we're going to talk about. And we're also going to give consideration to like that work-life separation, that routine. Something else that we need to consider is that there's a very different environment when we're working remotely. And for some people, particularly if they're neurodivergent, again, thinking about the fact that it is National Inclusion Week, some people working remotely are going to find that they don't feel like themselves online when they're kind of on video calls. They might feel quite understimulated working from home. So again, we might need to give consideration to that and giving people flexibility to use co-working spaces, for example, whereas actually working remotely might work amazingly for people who find being in an office environment really distracting and overstimulating. So there are pros and cons to absolutely any style of working, and that includes working remotely. So when we are talking about isolation and loneliness really is about feeling alone regardless of the amount of social contact you're having. So you can be working from home and have 300 messages from all your colleagues who are dropping your DMs, they're in your WhatsApps, they're on your Teams or on your Slack, whatever, and you can feel very, very isolated regardless. So it's more about the quality of our connections. And as people, we're very, very social beings. We need to feel that we belong, that we're valued, that we matter, that we've got a sense of purpose. We're evolved to live in like villages and tribes and to have those social connections. So actually not being around other people and in the physical presence of people can lead to feeling lonely. And that's important because if people do struggle with loneliness, they're more likely to struggle with their mood, which can make it much more difficult to then get out and about and see people in their kind of personal lives. So feeling lonely due to work, maybe because you're working remotely, can increase pressure sometimes on your relationships in your personal life, but it doesn't have to be the case. If anyone's ever seen Catfish on MTV, I'm a firm fan favourite, or I think there's a film on Netflix probably. There are lots and lots of people who form really strong bonds with people in the absence of even having spoken to them over the phone. So it's not impossible at all. And in the same way that you can feel deeply connected, but while talking to somebody online, for example, you can also be in a really crowded room and feel completely isolated and alone. But there are benefits to having that global community. So the fact that people are going to be working in silos almost, and they're going to have to make a very conscious effort to build relationships with their colleagues and to maintain those, means that the relationships they do end up with are likely to have a bit more depth and substance than necessarily we might find sometimes if we're working in an office and we have lots of superficial chat day to day, which for your business is going to improve the way that people collaborate and work together. That lack of a shared, mother tongue or first language and the cultural differences in communication styles can actually improve communication. They can improve patience for other people. It can improve things like the use of non-verbal nods. So like kind of engage the way that you're engaging with people, which will translate then again in terms of the way that people communicate with your customers and hopefully give them a better experience. And then kind of psychologically, what we're thinking of, I suppose, today aren't people who've been forced to work from home because of the pandemic, but because they're choosing to work from home. Lots of people choose remote work because they've got improved freedom, flexibility, they've got a better work-life balance. They might have opportunities available to them that they wouldn't have if they were spending 4 hours commuting a week and not getting home till 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, and then they're exhausted and drained and can't really be bothered to go back out and do things that make them feel alive and feel like life is enjoyable and not just about work. And not everyone enjoys being in an office and enjoys being in the presence of other people all of the time. So again, if we're thinking about neurodivergent colleagues, for example, again, it is National Inclusion Week. There are lots of people who are going to thrive in these circumstances. And you might make friends and connections worldwide, which personally I think could save you a fortune on Airbnb when you're traveling. So another bonus. As it froze? Oh, there we go. As it moves the wrong way. Perfect. So building connections. So using places like Global Air, you can use values-based recruitment to help you hire staff who share similar values, which is really, really important for retention. Ways of working can be taught, but finding people who align with what you strive for in a business and the way that you work is going to help you find people who are more likely to stay longer term. And we can also use technology to our advantage. But ultimately, what we think about at PMAC is prioritising the well-being of your staff. If people feel isolated and disconnected and lonely, they're less likely to stay, no matter how much they love the work that you guys do. So I suppose to think about improving kind of connectivity globally, we have to think about how we connect to others normally. So typically we look for common ground when we meet new people. We find ways to relate to one another and find overlaps in our experiences. Also sharing experiences, so going through something with somebody else, whether it's, typically team away days, it can be even like having a really challenging day, it can be bonding. Feeling like people are genuinely interested in us helps us to feel connected to them. And that's really, really easy to kind of do online, because you can just maybe make a couple of little notes while you're having conversations, for example, of things that appear to be important to the other person. And then when you're following up, you might be able to have a more meaningful experience, a more meaningful conversation, rather than just trying to remember what they watched on Netflix last night and just kind of trying to start from scratch every day, because you're not really paying much attention. You can also use your body language really, really well online. So you can show that you're interested, invested in this person by, smiling, kind of leaning in, trying to maintain eye contact. I think we all know what it's like when you're online and somebody's looking everywhere but at the screen, or they've clearly got 300 tabs open and couldn't care less. So actually we can use our body language online to show that we are trying to establish that connection with people. And then in terms of like little tools and techniques that you can use to connect, so again, these are more generic stuff. If there's anything for your business particularly that you think could be useful, feel free to reach out to us. But we can start with things like experiences bingo. So for example, you choose one kind of bingo master in the business who emails everybody and asks, who's been on holiday in the last year, how many languages do you speak, do you have any pets? And essentially everybody plays bingo, and when you've every time a scenario relates to you, you tick it off, we all win. And also we find ways to overlap in terms of our experiences, that sort of stuff. You can play guess here, you get photos of everybody in the business, and rather than just kind of going to, do they have blonde hair? Do they have a white beard? Do they wear glasses? We can look at I don't know, who's got pets at home, who's a parent, who works in the UK, and use, again, you know, more meaningful information about people to kind of build them out. You can do charades really easily online. And also lip reading games can be really, really fun, particularly because you can just mute yourself rather than in person where you're more likely to actually accidentally blurt stuff out. You can also do like bad lip reading, which can be really, really funny. You can use like rock, paper, scissors championships, get a bit of competition going, which can be really, really enjoyable. And again, creates a bit of a shared experience. You can use like music quizzes, a bit like a pub quiz where everybody sends in a song that makes them feel alive, a cheesy song, a guilty pleasure they love, something they'll love singing along to in the car. And again, a bit of a quiz can just be a bit more fun for people. We can also use like lunch socials, so like lunch and learn. So rather than just using lunch and learn to find out, you know, or upskill, I suppose, people in areas within the business, what we can do is like take it in turns to share information about something that matters to you, that's important to you, about a hobby that you have, about your culture, for example. Again, using things like the music quiz, we can create shared playlists that everyone can listen to feel connected to one another at the same time. We can use all the channels that Vincent spoke about earlier, things like Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, and almost have like a mini team social media where you can just share stuff about your life, because that's so important. And we can also use a technique called body doubling. So body doubling, essentially, if we're doing it remotely, it looks like yourself and a partner joining a video call at the same time. You don't have to be interacting the whole time. You just physically be in there, same way that you would if you're working next to somebody in an office. So you might have moments of conversation for like a couple of minutes, but also it can be really, really useful for helping people focus and stay on track if they see that other people aren't being quite so distracted as I might be. And also it's really useful as a technique for new starters, because they can body double and shadow people outside of their team and just get to know people within the business generally. And then final note from us, because again, that work-life separation can be difficult to maintain when you are working remotely. Some really, really simple tools and techniques are creating a commute, which if you can tie it into getting to some sunlight, 5-10 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon is amazing. So literally, as you would in work, just maybe go for a quick walk before you sit down and start your day. You can also use your environment. Our brains are very lazy. If we are seeing our laptop about, our lanyard and stuff when we're off work, we're going to automatically start thinking about work. So just putting stuff away at the end of the day. And then also just washing and changing, which might sound a bit strange. But again, what we're wearing kind of tells our brain how we need to present. Am I with my friends and I'm in my best going out stuff? Am I in, I don't know, a uniform, for example? So just having a wash at the end of the day, literally washing the day away and putting on something that helps you to feel like you can focus, not putting on your favourite slippers just because we're at home. Save that till 5 o'clock can influence how well we're able to focus. So I'm mindful I've absolutely flown through that because we're short on time. If you do have any questions or you want to talk any more, please, please, please do connect on like LinkedIn, drop us a message, however you feel most comfortable. And yeah, thank you from me at PMAC.
Amazing. I'm popping up the links for Hayley's LinkedIn in the chat. So please connect
Thank you.
and learn more about PMAC. And yeah, we have a couple of minutes to do a little Q&A session. So guys, if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself and speak or just write us in a chat if you feel that it's more comfortable.
If I may quickly ask a quick question. Could I get some more information from Shamir on the employer on records, because we are basically an accounting firm that always looks for recruitments from Pakistan and India, and finding the right talent and employment contracts, so that would be great if you could email me that. Really
Sure.
appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem at all.
I've dropped the email address in the chat anyway, so it's hassan.khan@fusionaccountants.co.uk.
Yeah, got
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hayley mentioned something about guilty pleasures, so I'll just put my hand up now and say Taylor Swift is the new guilty pleasure for me. I'm a
Ooh.
super fan of Taylor Swift.
No judgment here, okay? Judgment free zone.
Are you going on a concert as well, Shamir? She's touring.
Oh, I think we got a question from Hannah.
Yep. Hannah asked, do you offer any mental health first aid in Haley?
Yeah, so at PMAC, we are able to help kind of train people up as mental health first aiders. What we like to be able to do again is get to know a little bit about the business and what the needs are. And to be honest, we like to adapt an approach where we kind of sandwich the training, because what we find an awful lot with businesses is they might invest a lot of time and money making people mental health first aiders, but if colleagues don't necessarily understand the purpose of the role, it's not always kind of used in the way that people would hope. So sometimes like a bit of a general understanding of what would contribute to maybe a mental health issue that a mental health first aider can help with, as a bit of an overview for a business, can be really, really helpful. And that can kind of come before or after. But yeah, mental health first aid, and feel free to drop us a message. Our email, if you would like as well, I can pop in the chat. You can email me directly, or you can email us at info@pmac.uk. But yeah, that's something we can help with, Hannah.
Amazing. Thanks, Haley. And next question from Tina. What are some tips and tricks to remote team collaboration?
Yeah, so I imagine, again, we can probably answer that a little bit, but also I think the work that Shamir and Vincent do often, I think they can probably answer a lot from just their own experiences as well, having teams where people are based more remotely. But again, oh, sorry, I just saw another message come through. How are you dealing with the hybrid workplace when some are remote and some are together? So that's really interesting. So for example, when we are trying to improve collaboration, I'll try and link it into your previous point. What we can do is have stuff where almost like away days where everyone is kind of remote so that everybody's in the same position. Or we can do lots of things as well. We personally have delivered lots of trainings that have been adapted for the team that are in person versus the team remotely, because the team who are remotely, again, we're kind of having to preempt and overcome some barriers to feeling connected in the same way, engaging in the same way, that sort of stuff. So in the same way that workplaces can offer a hybrid approach to working, in terms of like that improving collaboration, we're better off offering a hybrid approach to that as well, because there's people in the office and the barriers to kind of connect in there are going to be very, very different for those working remotely. But again, Vincent and Shamir, I'm sure, can answer a lot from their personal experience as well.
Yeah, happy to jump in here from a team. So Teamed is a remote first company. We don't have an office. We have colleagues around the globe. And when it comes to, I think one of the questions was around collaboration. One of the things that we do is try, if possible, we try and have it async. If there's any kind of work to be done and it can be done kind of in your own time async, then that works for everyone. Because of course, what you don't want to be doing is having scheduling meetings that are convenient for you, for us, because I'm in the UK, but I've got colleagues in India where, of course, time zones may be a bit different. So any async opportunities, we will take advantage of that. We're really getting into Loom videos now. So what we're actually doing is recording videos for updates and those types of things to make it a little bit more engaging than just a bunch of content. But we're trying to keep it engaged. So we now encourage people to use Loom to share whatever they're doing as a part of their team. But then obviously on the flip side of that, what we do want to do is keep people engaged, do build that culture. So we do often have, we use Slack, and there's a feature in Slack which is called, I don't even know if it's the right name or not, but Coffee Buddies. So what it'll do is actually pair you up with someone. Now, from my team, I speak with my team on a regular basis, but I don't necessarily speak to people in finance on a daily basis, or I don't speak to people on employee ops on a regular basis. So this Coffee Buddy thing is actually quite cool, because every so often you're paired up with someone in your company who you might not speak to every day, but it's good to just have a 30-minute chat with them. And it's not necessarily about work. Actually, I found out when I had my last coffee buddy meetup. It was one of my colleagues in Panama, and she gave me a whole list of things on Netflix that I should be watching, because I keep watching the same thing over and over again. So it's those types of things that we're trying to do, and every so often we meet face to face a couple of times a year, of course, but aside from that, what we're also trying to do is embed times where we meet, and if you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't. It's not a problem. But if you can join, then we do things like online games and some of those things. So some things that Hayley has kind of presented, we will definitely be using to keep people engaged as a company-wide thing.
Yeah,
Donut.
yeah, we also use Donut as
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, and we would do some virtual games, like charades, quizzes, as Hayley mentioned. We've even done the virtual escape room at Global M as an activity, and it was very fun. So you should guys check it out. And yeah, we will share the presentation and the recording with you in the newsletter after this meeting. And I also want to share a little link with you for a little form that will ask you to fill in if you have time, because we really value your feedback, and we plan to organize some more events and webinars. So it will be great to know where we can improve. So yeah, if you have spare 2 minutes, please answer the questions in there. Are you raising a hand, Vincent? Or you're leaving a reaction?
No, I have to get used to Microsoft Teams. I wanted to give an applause, but the hand worked.
Yeah, anyway, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks everyone for joining, for your questions, for being active. We hope it was useful. Check our social media for new events or webinars. I think we're hosting some quite often. So yeah, and reach out to us, to Hayley, Vincent, Shamir, if you need anything. And yeah, we'll share the main information with you by newsletter.